Welcome to the attendees that have chosen to join us. Thank you so much for that. Very brief introduction from me to the whole Anker and Marsh thing. Some years ago, Jason and I were meeting for beers. I'd had to step away from my business at the time, Ryder Marsh, to one of my children wasn't very well. We'd meet for beers, and Jason would say, "Well, what do I do next?" You know. And I would always encourage Jason to think about going to speaking positively about the recovery that he'd made, and also put a consultancy behind it. And we met with an organisation. They better remain nameless, I think, Jason, because they never actually did anything with it, did they? They talked a great fight, and then they didn't do anything with it. But we had a meeting with them, and they said, look, what you really need to do, Jason, in order for us to help you with this project that Jason was trying to set up, is link up with somebody who kind of shares your values and your vision, and who has some consultancy experience. And I was sitting there, you know, like the Vicar of Dibley, saying, yes, listen to this man, he's talking great sense, kind of followed by, why is everybody looking at me? What? And so we went for a pint and made an agreement. And celebrated with a hot dog, I seem to remember, Jace, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because we really flashed like that, a high class consultancy. And 2019, I really went far better the first year than we could ever have imagined. Looked great, and the beginning of the year, all things looked positive. Obviously, a year off. Although the good news is our training centre, we have an online training centre which is nice and busy, and that's keeping the lights on. So a reset for 2021. So that's us. But this is really all about Jason, of course. So Jason, when I met you the first time we sat down and we had a few beers together, you'd really established yourself as, I think, Europe's leading inspirational speaker, as Susan just said, really around the world of safety. Very much safety in those days. So could you talk us through what happened and how you'd come to be, you know, Europe's a very preeminent safety speaker on the European stage?
Yeah, I mean, my accent, I'll go, if people don't know me, I'll give you a very, very brief, just recap of the accent. 1993, I was just 24 years old. Doing a job I didn't like on a building site, and in the afternoon, took on a job, rush job, end of shift, no planning, no risk assessment. I fell 10 feet from a ladder, suffering catastrophic spine injuries, but that has left me permanently using a wheelchair. Obviously, went through 5 months of rehab. Back then, no real focus on your mental capabilities. It was all about getting you fit as possible to leave hospital and live a life in a wheelchair. But unfortunately, my life really started to unravel actually when I came home from hospital. After one day, my wife, she walked out with my young children. We'd not been getting on before the accident, and you was advised at the time, you know, if you're suffering, if you manage to suffering many kind of problems, the chances are it won't even last a year. Again, I didn't know how to speak to anybody. I could see the devastation my family was going through anyway, even me in a wheelchair, and I resorted to drinking. Alcohol became my crutch. I drink excessively. I'd have my children, my daughter Abby would stay with me through the week. I probably wouldn't drink at all, and then she'd go out for a weekend, and I'd go on a weekend bender all weekend, and it was a cycle that I couldn't get out of. I had a counsellor, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to share my feelings still, but he gave me a big pot of antidepressants. And I quickly realised if I answer the right questions, he'll leave me antidepressants. So again, I was using antidepressants, drinking heavily. And unfortunately, that still wasn't enough. Looking at my dark moods, and I quite shamefully started to use recreational drugs, not to get high, just so I could cope. After 2 years, unfortunately, my life spiraled out of control. I took an unintentional drugs overdose, leaving me in a coma for 17 days. My mum and dad were advised to turn the machine off. There's sort of no hope for me. But luckily, my dad said no, and after 17 days, I came out of the coma. The symptoms were pretty similar to having a stroke. So I already couldn't use my legs, and now I sort of lose the left-hand side of my body. Again, a 4 or 5 month stint in hospital in rehab, came out and went on the road of recovery. And I think most people will expect that this was a turning point in my life, but unfortunately it wasn't. If anything, it made things worse. I was so ashamed of what I'd done, you know, my family, my friends, taking drugs, it just wasn't me. Drinking was still a bit of a problem for me. I'd sort of self-medicate. I wasn't on antidepressants anymore, but I was sleeping really poorly. But I found a cycle of coping. My daughter both times living me full time, so get up every morning, get the daughter to school. The weekends my daughter went to stop with her mum, I'd be drinking again all weekend, and it was just like a fortnightly cycle I got myself on. It was like a coping mechanism. After 5 years, I was supposed to get some compensation. Again, people believe that compensation is the answer. We agreed on a settlement, but unfortunately there was further problems, so that went by the wayside, and I was told it would take as long as it would take. I'd found a way of coping. Water skiing, disabled water skiing, it offered me a chance to get away from pub life with all my friends. I turned out to be quite good at it, actually, and it became a weekly obsession. Every weekend I'd be going skiing. But unfortunately, the culture in the water skiing crowd was we'd ski in the daytime and we'd have a few drinks at night. So actually, I did not really escape drinking. It was always a problem because of the dark moods I was facing, that I didn't feel I could speak up to people. I used drink to forget. So I drink to excess. It wasn't a couple of drinks. I drink to get drunk. Unfortunately, my injuries from the drugs overdose means I'm very susceptible to alcohol. So I have a few pints, and before that, I've fallen out of my chair. So friends are always accommodating me, taking me home, picking me up. 2000, Sam came to live with me. So now I've got everything I ever dreamed of. I was living.
Jace, who's for the viewers? Who's Sam?
Oh, sorry, Sam's my son. Sorry, yeah, Sam's my son. Yeah, Sam came to me as well. So we've looked after my kids. I've got my water skiing and drinking excessively every other weekend. I'd found a way of coping. 2005 was the year I finally got my compensation. Again, to compensate you for your accident. But for the first time, I actually became aware about how bloody depressed I was. And yet, I got all this money in the bank. So I just started spending the cars, the clothes, the holidays. I went to Tenerife most winters, 2 or 3 months at a time. Just by chance there, one year I hadn't gone away, and I was at a Christmas party, and I bumped into a guy. Didn't know him, came over to me and just asked me outright, why are you in a wheelchair? So I told him the story. He said, you need to start sharing your story. He says, but I'm more interested in what the accident, what you chose to do in your life after the accident. I'm not really interested in what you did. The guy's name was Dan Terry. And for the next 2 years, I used to go and sit in a room, down and do a day's course, and I used to be the inspirational speaker instead of showing a video. But this gave me the opportunity to listen to Dan, and I picked up on some of the things he was saying. It related so much to my story. Some of the things, why I took them chances at work. And so my career began, and that's what I did. It was a typical "Don't Be Like Me" story, where I'd share all my stories of my accident, the things I've been through, the effect on my family and friends, ending with some really sad story at the end. And I truly believe that that was the answer, that I could encourage people to speak up about safety. And I thought that would be the answer. And for 8 years, that's what I did. But over the last 2 or 3 years, with all the thing about health and well-being that's around at the moment.
Jason, I need to stop you there. This is still question one. You can't go on to question two just yet. If you could just tell the viewers about some of the awards you won, some of the accolades you got as an out-and-out safety speaker.
So again, awards. 2015, I was awarded an MBE. went to the palace with my dad and Abby. A really, really fantastic day. But again, I don't believe I took the most from it. You know, I was more proud for my dad. You know, I was so proud that day. Numerous awards. And again, I get the awards. And it was fantastic. I go to award ceremonies. I'd be on stage. People giving a round of applause. But never really feeling fulfilled, if I'm totally honest. There was always seemed to be something missing.
But always very busy and always invited back.
Yeah, you know, my role as a speaker, you know, I've been and seen some amazing places. I was involved in the aircraft carriers when it was being built. I was taken on board one of the carriers onto one of the decks. I've been in some amazing places. But at the time, looking back sort of 4 or 5 years ago, still I didn't think I took what I should have really taken out of these experiences. My job was fantastic. Money was coming in. I was earning a good wage, nice things. I moved to a nicer house. So all the things that people expect to make life better, I was achieving, and yet I still personally didn't feel like, you know, I was happy.
Okay, and then after a few conversations with different people, including myself, you know, you started to get really quite healthy, you know, and really quite resilient. I remember when you had a relationship split up, you know, and then maybe you could tell the viewers about that. And it was me that was sort of saying, hang on a minute, you've got really resilient, haven't you? And a lot of people saying to you, goodness, you look well. You know, I genuinely think you look 10 years younger today than you did 10 years ago when I first met you.
Yeah.
So you know, a change in lifestyle, a change in mindset really begat the new talk. You know, it's not about a fall, it's about the bounce. Could you talk us through that change in mindset, that change in orientation that you undertook there?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably about 4 years ago, you know, I started making some conscious changes in my life. Alcohol wasn't really benefiting me at all. So I'd already made some conscious changes in my life, and probably one thing that was missing from my life, that not so much that I noticed, but everybody else, that I lived by myself. So there was a lot of pressure from my mum, not pressure, but you know, why you meet somebody nice, Jason? And I did. The relationship went pretty fast, and we moved into a house together. But my concern all along was, what if things went wrong? You know, I was so terrified that if I committed to a relationship and it didn't work out, would I return to them dark places that I did previously? And funnily enough, Tim, it was a week she decided to leave, and we'd arranged a meeting in Manchester. And I sort of tell you that we'd split up, and you said, "Are you okay?" And I always remember it, Tim, because I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And you just gave me that sort of critical look and said, "Yes, you are." And I think it's from that moment I suddenly realised that your mindset plays a lot into how you cope with trauma. You know, I was always, this chair had taken so much away from my life. I was so negative about my wheelchair, and yet now I can look at this wheelchair as the thing that's enabled me to do some of the things I've done, like going to Buckingham Palace with my dad, some of the places I've been. So actually this chair is turned to a positive thing in my life. It's not a negative thing. You know, I'll always said that, you know, this wheelchair, I wish I had not had my accident, but I can't change that because I have. So I'm going to spend the rest of my life sat in this wheelchair. So I want to make it the best experience I possibly can.
So what changes did you make, Jace, that make you look healthy? I mean, obviously cutting down on the pop helps a lot, but I know you did some other things as well. So
yeah, the alcohol thing was a big burden for me, because I was a social drinker. You know, I go out on a Friday and a Saturday night and drink far too much. Always drank to excess. Cut that out straight away. So why not go the whole lot? So people who see me so different, especially people that see me for a while, and say, what have you done? Because you are so different. I think for many years I was searching for a big thing to change my life, and I've tried loads of things, tackled Buddhism, all different things. That these big things will make me change. But what's actually made me change is a series of small changes, which I think is achievable for anybody. So cut out on alcohol, cut out caffeine. I drink water all the time. And it's not for everybody, but I'm obsessed with it. Hot water, cold water, that's what I drink. So I'm always really hydrated, which has a benefit for me being in a wheelchair, because you can tend to suffer a lot of water infections. I used to get 2 or 3 a year, quite nasty, end up in bed on antibiotics. I think I've got about 18 months at the minute, Tim. So, all these things. The sleep was really bad. Overthinking things. So I go to a gym a couple of days a week, do some boxing training. I eat really well. So I think all these things are adding up, and it's been this slow progression of things where getting comments like you say, well, Tim, people see me now and say, wow, you're so different, you look so well, what have you done? My sleep is so much better. I go to bed every single night. I turn the telly off half an hour before I go to bed. I've got a bit of a routine of going to bed. I'm always really grateful, think about what I've just had. I sleep really, really well. Wake up every morning, don't dive out of bed, just have a sort of 10, 15 minutes to myself in the morning. Drink of water when I get up, always have some breakfast. And it's all these small changes that I think everybody is capable of doing. And I think all what we've been through this last year, I've always said it's easy to be resilient when things are going well, but do these things when things aren't going quite so well. And me too, I'm a bit of a worrier, I get a bit anxious quite a lot, but through this crisis I've been quite well. I've had a few moments, but I think that is the benefit of what I've done. What I've learned now is when I do have a bad day, I seem to deal with it a lot better than what I did before. There's no turning to the bottle anymore. So I think I've come a long, long way by doing some simple things. I think we are all capable of doing these things as well.
Actually, one thing, Jace, you don't talk about in your talks, but since you've raised it, I'll talk about it as your business partner. You are a worrier, you're a born worrier, and occasionally things will worry you. But what we do, I guess, is you get on the phone and you say, I'm worried about this. And we talk about it, and you always stay calm, and we just chat it through, and make a plan if plan's needed, or just double check figures if that's what's needed, and that's fine. And it's that dialogue, that proactively addressing it calmly, really helps. You're really good at that.
Speaking personally, Tim, as we did, you'll know the difference. You can see the difference in me, the conversations we have now, from the conversation we had last year. Because I'd always be that concerned person. I always see the dark side of things, and I don't know more. I'm very, very positive, and even going through, talking about safety and making poor decisions. It's a decision I made a few weeks ago, and I am a lot better. But I also know that there are going to be days that aren't so good as others. And I found a way now of tackling these days a lot better. So it's not about being resilient, everything's always good. It's just being aware that good and bad things are always going to happen. Just how we deal with that crisis is a thing that's different, because the crisis is the crisis. It's just how you deal with the crisis. It's something that's going to be very new to my presentations that I'm definitely going to be speaking about, is that even though we think we're doing really, really well, there's always an opportunity that we slip up, and we have to recognise when we've slipped back a little bit. So it's a brand new. It's still a bit raw. I'm telling the story because I've not quite worked on it yet. But fundamentally, obviously, I speak about I'm doubly incontinent. Accidents are very, very infrequently these days. I had 2 in 2 days. One was I seen in the car with my daughter in town. It just doesn't happen. But I had 2 in 2 days. I think some work had been cancelled that week as well. So, as mentioned before, I've always been quite anxious with things, struggle with anxiety a little bit, but I let things slip a little bit. So normally I just deal with this problem, but I'm not being conscious about it. My sleep pattern went out the window. I wasn't going to bed in the same way I did. Wasn't sleeping at night. Got a bit anxious, and my daughter Abby suggested a day out to a country park. So I drove in my car. Abby was following me in her car. Still a lot of things on my mind. I think I've taken a phone call on the journey, which I shouldn't have done, but a quick call. So my mind wasn't quite on the journey, and came to the country park, and there was a ford across the river that's always passable, and it was slightly swollen. I stopped the car. So I always talk about giving yourself 5 seconds. When you believe that something isn't quite right, stop and think about it and make the right decision. So I stopped the car. There was people queuing watching on the bridge with children, and for whatever reason, I drove across the ford. I got to the other side, came out, and then my car stopped. Got to the side of the road, thought I could let it dry out for an hour, but wouldn't start, so it's been taken away. And I beat myself up. You know, I speak about making the right choice at safety, yet there I was making a poor choice. And yet, it was only when I came home and really thought about it that maybe that poor decision was created by my mindset. I had a bad week, I let things get to me. So when that critical decision came, I made the wrong choice. Because I know if I'd been in a good place, what I would have done was got to a ford, turned the car around and drove a mile around the detour and got another car park. So I think it was unfortunately for me, I mean, no one's injured or anything, but it was a great lesson learned that when things are slipping, and there's well-being and we're not sleeping properly, are we more prone to making poor decisions?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I did a comment for a LinkedIn thread the other day that got more likes, I think, than anything I've ever commented on. Somebody suggested that one of the main root causes of accidents was laziness. You know, that people are just lazy, they try and take shortcuts, they can't be bothered. And it was early in the morning, and I was grumpy, so I piled in and said, yeah, right, or, you know, you've come up with some stupid rules that you haven't consulted me about, you just imposed on me. They don't really make any sense. They're not very well articulated, or it could be that I'm just having a really bad day, and you know, and if for one more fool just, you know, takes away control from me and tells me what to do without rhyme or reason, my head's just going to go pop, you know, etc., etc., and then finished off with, actually, you know, it's a good idea really to always assume that people aren't lazy before you rush to judgment, because it undermines so much of what's good about a holistic and analysis-based approach to safety. And it seemed to resonate. They got lots and lots of likes, although it's been taken down now, so I don't know what's going on there. It's very strange. Anyway, but that's what you're saying here, isn't it? I mean, you know, your talk has moved very much from be careful because you could be like me, through to try and be more like me, try and be analytical, try and be thoughtful, try and question everything, try and see the person behind every mistake that's made. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, Tim. Taking it even one stage further. So my presentation has always started from January 3rd, 1993. You know, that was the day I thought my life had changed. And yet, what I now speak about is I go back like a year prior to my accident. You know, I've been a songwriter from school. I was very arty. It was my dream job, and I loved it. You know, it wasn't the best paid job in the world, but I went every day. I absolutely loved my job. 1992, I've been made redundant. The last big recession we had, sort of lost my job. I loved, but being a family man, I had to find some work. So I did a variety of jobs. Ended up working on a building site, a job I hated, low morale. It's affected me outside work as well. I was arguing with my wife at the time quite a lot. The night before my accident, I was at a party with my supervisor. And I can remember him saying to me, we need to go now, we've got work in the morning. And because of my poor state of mind at the time, I'm staying out for a few more drinks. Now, I can't remember going home. I can barely remember being picked up the next day. So had my health and well-being influenced that poor safety choice I made that day at work? And, you know, and you've helped me so much to with my accident, because before it was all about being still at the bottom of that ladder, making that poor safety choice. You know, why did I just speak up that day about what I was being asked to do? You know, and that hung over me for years. And now I've actually realised that there was so much more into that decision making. You know, my poor state of mind at the time, I wasn't sleeping properly, marriage problems, money problems, all those problems. And I think the worry for me has been for a long time is we are now in a similar situation what everyone has just been through with this crisis. So that mindset I was in for that year prior to my accident, there's a lot of people who are going back to work now. Some people have worked through the whole crisis, but everybody's been affected in some way by what we've been through. So, you know, you know, it's even more critical, I think, now to adopt these sort of well-being ideas of, you know, good diet, bit of exercise, cut down on alcohol because people think it won't make any difference, and it does about decision making. Poor decision making is often influenced by a lot more things than just people wanting to work unsafely.
Well, obviously, you know, we've been, one of the things we've been doing, we have a, you know, some of the, if you look, if anybody's interested, they're little 50-second introductions to Anker and Marsh on the website, and some of the names that flash past in terms of clients really were very well known. Let's just put it that way, and that's because we've been taking a holistic approach to human error. It's actually, we call it here too, don't we? You know, error reduction through education and empowerment here too. And for the readers, what we're looking at is obviously the culture of the organization. You know, are you working in a creative and caring culture, supportive, or are you working in a culture that's really quite blame driven? You know, so it's always the last person holding the bomb when it goes off, it's their fault. You know, looking at the soft skills of the supervisors, you know, are you able to coach and bring people on? Looking at home life, you know, are you able to encourage good habits like sleep, breathing, exercise, so on and so forth. And so taking a really holistic approach. You know, which is the third and really the final kind of formal question I've got for you, Jace. You know, you know, obviously you had lots of awards. You had the MBE, you know, lauded as this, that, and the other is great, and an honour to work with you and all that. But the one criticism you did get occasionally, people would pop up and they'd say, it's just a talk. You only get a week or two's benefit from people going out thinking, whoa, that was either really powerful, or the modern one now is, that's really inspirational. I'm going to go off and be my best self. And it only lasts a week or two. You know, how do you, well, obviously the answer is that we now work in tandem when we do training and stuff. But did you have much of that over the years? And how do you respond to those criticisms there?
Yeah, I think I'll probably answer it in two parts. The first one is, I always say a motivational speak is great, but it only actually works if the company decides to do something with it. It's the, you know, it's the opening bit of making people want to change, and then what the training or what the company does next is the most critical thing, because that's what's going to give it the, whatever you do, the longevity of what you're trying to achieve. Obviously, I've changed my story, how I set it out. So half the story now is about my accident, don't be like me. But the second part of the presentation is all about be like me. And I'll talk about the changes I made. So why people criticizing inspirational speakers, you know, what is a value? There's a huge value for what we do. I try and encourage all the speakers I work with who tell an inspirational story to always end it on a positive note. And one of the reasons I use now is that, you know, typically if you imagine I'm on a building site or a construction site or a shipyard, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, I give a presentation, don't be like me, put the fear of going to people, and yet they just go out working for the next eight hours. So it's really important that we end the presentations on such a positive note. And I think that's sort of, can't think that's the bit that gives me confidence in what I'm doing is a right approach, because it leads so much into what we do at Anker and Marsh these days. You know, people want to know what else is, what can we do with this story, and what we can do with this story is the stuff that we do at Anker and Marsh. And the here too thing, the product we've got now is perfect because it leads directly into it. But my belief is that typically, I think when you do a safety presentation, we always get 1 or 2 people who come for a chat afterwards, and usually on the scenario, I fell off a ladder 20 years ago, and we'd have a little bit of conversation. But since we brought all these things about health and well-being into the presentation, we have a lot more people actually stop behind for a conversation. So we know what we're doing now is the right approach. A story that happened last year that's always resonated with me, that the approach we're taking now is the correct approach, because I think some people are so terrified what health and well-being brings to the workplace. I was working for an airline company, I don't know who it was, done a few sessions, and I was doing the last session on a Thursday for the engineers who was on the night shift to service the planes that flew around Europe the next day. And the guy came to me and said that his brother was also in a wheelchair. His brother lived in London, he lived in Exeter. One of our parents has died a couple of weeks ago. I'm very concerned about my brother. I can't hear anything from him by phone, by text, by mail. I've listened to your presentation about family is so important. So tomorrow I'm going to drive to London. I'm not going to work. So I'm so concerned. He says, to tell the truth, I can't remember being at work all week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he'd been at work on autopilot, servicing planes, flying passengers potentially around Europe. So I said, well, go and tell your manager what you just told me. And he took my phone number, so I'm going to ring you up over the weekend. So he rang me and said, look, I took your advice. I went to tell my manager and I told him exactly what was happening. And he said to me, don't come to work tomorrow, go and see your brother in London. Well, then I think the question that really got to me was, his manager then said to him, are you okay to do your shift tonight or do you want to go home? And he just said, I'll do my shift. Because he cleared all this worry off his mind, he felt able then to do his shift at work. So as we've gone through this journey, I've learned so much, Tim, from what, this new approach, it's so much in that. I think that's the direct message. This is not about creating workplaces where people come to work and full of fear. If you can create a workplace where it's a nice place to come to work, people can arrive from work and have a good day at work, actually go home better than what they arrived.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. We talk about vicious and virtuous circles all the time, and a good work is good for you. All the models suggest that actually, if you have a job that you find enriching, empowering, enjoyable, you go home slightly better off than if you didn't need to work at all. And you walk in with a big smile on your face, and you play with the kids, and you eat well, and you don't drink too much, and you get on with your wife and repeat. And if you have a bad day at work, you go home, you're grumpy, you drink too much, you don't get on with the wife, you argue with the kids, you sleep on the couch, and repeat. And it's really all about, the whole thing is just about vicious and virtuous circles, isn't it? And the role of an individual in kicking them off, the role of a supervisor. The way that do you ask, for example, if something's gone wrong, do you ask why curiously because you're in a spirit of inquiry, or do you ask it aggressively because you're pissed off and that somebody's inconvenienced you, and all that fundamental attribution error stuff about when things go wrong, you just blame the person standing next to it automatically, unless you train yourself not to. So, just to summarize the whole thing about inspirational speakers, obviously we've agreed this in advance because we've been doing it for the last two or so years, but yes, I'm the wrong person to be asking the question, really, but what we do agree, and I think for the viewers, I think is really clear, is that an inspirational speaker, basically, two reasons. One, as part of a holistic approach that will involve some sort of culture change program that's focused on frontline supervisors and leadership, as well as empowerment. It's part of a key approach. And what you're trying to do is to say, look, this is coming, embrace it. And the second one, of course, is to say, look, when people ask for volunteers for things like behavioral root cause analysis teams, volunteer. And so when we use you as a weapon, as a spearhead, at the company, it's to say, right, well, this is coming next month, volunteer for it. And of course, because it's you, Jace, we get lots and lots of volunteers, and that's great. But yeah, over the years, there has been not a lot of criticism, because people don't like to criticize, but there has been quiet criticism of the inspirational speaker approaches, not blaming, kind of blaming the victim a bit, all that stuff from the unions about behavioral safety is blaming the victim, and you're constantly saying, not if you do it on an analysis basis, rather than a behavioral basis, so yeah. So what I'll do, Jace, I think is, we're cracking on now into the presentation. I'll just summarize where we're at, and then we've got a question, haven't we, for the delegates to see what they think of this. So what we've been doing at Anker and Marsh, this here too thing that we do, basically says, look, if you take a holistic approach to why people make mistakes, obviously they make mistakes because they're not trained. They make mistakes because they haven't been inducted properly. They make mistakes because they haven't got the right amount of time or the right tools. They make mistakes because they work in a culture that is blame driven, and everything is don't tell, don't keep your head down, don't learn, and so on, rather than learning focused. So they work in an organization where people, the supervisors, don't have high levels of emotional intelligence skills. So there's not much praising. Praise is 20 times effective as criticism, where there's not much coaching, but there's a lot more telling, where people don't always lead by, well, they're always leading by example, but not necessarily in a good way, sometimes in a hypocritical, do as I say, not as I do way, you know, and where people haven't got good habits, you know, or they're in a situation where it's difficult to have good habits because of all this. They're going home and the vicious circles are kicking in, because we do know that two of the huge contributors to people making mistakes are poor mental health, fatigue, you know, and you know, obviously Jason's story has got that, you know, right through in the build up to his accident. So when we work with organizations, we say, yeah, it's great. An employee assistance program, fantastic. Open to the family, fantastic. Self-report for counseling, fantastic. Mental health first aiders, great. You know, but all of it really in part of a holistic approach to a strong, creative, learning, empowerment-based culture. You know, because otherwise it's just bikes and bananas. You know, there's a banana in reception, and if you join the bike riding scheme, you know, there's some money goes to charity, but yeah. And so the question is, you know, as this whole thing has moved towards well-being, and we've got a question coming up, and the question is, what's your organization's take on this? I think Susan will put the question up. I'm not sure quite how this works, but Susan will pop a question up and be really interested to see what you think as viewers, where your organizations are on this. But over to you, Susan, I hope.
Yeah, that's right, Jason. I'm just getting the
Tim,
poll up.
Susan, but that's okay.
Sorry, Tim.
Okay, let's see what the delegates think.
The poll is now on the screen. We're just waiting for some results.
Okay. Susan, I've not used this this particular platform before. Are the delegates actually able to just click on the screen?
That's right. Yeah. So they're clicking. I'm just the vote is collecting. I will give about 20 seconds more, just a few more seconds to collect the polls, and I will put the answers on the screen. Okay. So I will close the poll now.
Great. What do we get
And
there?
I will share the results.
Okay. Okay, so 1 in 5 taking a genuinely holistic approach. That's great. And thick end of 2/3 really just at the beginning there. Okay. Yeah, and only 1 in 10 doing the whole bikes and bananas knee jerk, you know, ABC play by numbers stuff. Okay. Okay. Well, if that extrapolated out, then you'd expect that of the 2/3 who are just getting going, 2/3 of those, twice as many, yeah, 2/3 of those, twice as many would be aiming at something holistic rather than something simplistic. So 2 years from now, those figures should be really quite good, actually. About 50% taking a holistic approach. That would be, I think, if my maths is right. Excellent. Okay. Okay, Susan, I think, oh goodness, we're over 40 minutes in. I think time for questions, really, for Jason.
Okay, yep, there are a few questions that come up, and I will start with Kevin's question. He has, his question is, do you agree that well-being should be a much more discussed topic within the realms of health and safety, and the employer should invest far more time and resource in well-being of the employees?
Do you mind if I jump in on this one, Jace, with some figures, and I'll shut up and leave it to you. You know, when Jason and I started on this journey, we did some research, and one of the things that we found was that for every person in Britain, I know some of your people who've come in from around the world, but in Britain, for every person killed in an accident, 35 people will kill themselves, working people, this is. The figures are something like 10 to 1, even in something as dangerous as construction and waste management. So if you're in that whole zero harm argument, you know, as in define harm, you are 35 times more likely to go to the funeral of a colleague because they have killed themselves than because they have been injured in an accident. And of course, often with accidents, that's a simple thing. People who kill themselves have months of being hugely distracted. I think Jason's example of the chap who was maintaining planes when he was only half there. So the answer for me is, it couldn't be a bigger yes, frankly. You know, I like David Williams or whatever, isn't it? A big yes for me or something. And over to Jason. So.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's health, safety, and well-being. Please, these companies are just going down a well-being route or just a health. It has to be a holistic approach to health, safety, and well-being. Else it doesn't work. You know, my actually started out with a well-being issue, which turned into an accident safety side of it, which turned to a long-standing health issue. It can be a different version of that. It could be a safety problem, of course, one a well-being problem, of course, a health problem. So it just goes round and round. So for me, unless we start taking this holistic approach, it is going to be what it is.
Okay, that's a double yes then, I think, for Kevin.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, there is another question. This is for Jason, I believe, and that is from Bernadette. Do you find that sometimes it's hard to get in front of the audience that really need to hear you? I'm a safety professional who has had the opportunity and pleasure to hear people like Tim and yourself on a number of occasions, generally surrounded by audience of similar backgrounds to me. But do you get to appear at the morning or working week toolbox talk with the staff on the ground who come from a workplace where your accidents occurred?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as much as what I do now, speaking at conferences, it's fantastic. So the place I do speak, but I still love going on site, speak to the operatives, because it's, for me, that's where it starts for them. You know, we have a role to play, the supervisors, the management, but for me, my real speciality is speaking to the shop floor guys, you know, the supervisors and the sort of the middle management, because they're the people, sort of the sharp end of the accidents where, you know, but it's everybody has to hear the stories and get involved. But for me, yeah, I still love going onto the shop floors, love it. Yeah, talks, anything.
Jace, you know, you said when your career really took off was in response to somebody from the shop floor who was giving you a bit of a hard time. Maybe you should tell, is it Bernadette, I think, about that? That always resonates with me, that he flicked the switch in you, the guy.
Oh yeah. So very, very early in my career, obviously I was very, very nervous. I used to really go red. I didn't enjoy speaking at all. It was a real big struggle for me to even get the story out there. And it was more of a shortened version, because I didn't feel confident enough to share, talk about leg bags and all the personal things. I sort of held back a little bit. I just noticed one day a guy in the front row not really focused on the story. So I decided to just tell him everything. And at the end of the presentation, he just came to me and shook my hand. He said, "I get it now." I'm thinking, that moment, I got it. You know, it's by me sharing my story, hopefully I can encourage people to do something different. And I think the approach now, bringing the health and well-being into the presentation, and not just for me, because it's helped me expand my story. I feel, you know, I'm not reborn telling the story again, but I think the impact of the story, by focusing on health, safety and well-being, it resonates so much better with the audience. I really do.
Okay. Oh, everybody spends part of the day being a bit depressed or a bit anxious, you know. Depression being thinking about things that have already happened negatively, anxiety being thinking about things that haven't happened yet quite negatively, which we all do all day. It's just when it gets critical. So when you start talking about all that stuff, Jason, everybody in the room, it resonates with everybody in the room, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
Okay, we have another question. This is for both of you from Greg. Hi both, how well does the talk translate to other environments such as manufacturing rather than construction?
For me personally, the story's not about falling off a ladder. I mean, I talk about my accident now, or I actually did, but I do a full presentation in about 2 minutes. It's a very quick recap of my accident. I used to talk about the day and everything. I don't know more. I fell off a ladder. The accident is actually, doesn't mean anything. It's the consequence of that decision. So, you know, I regularly speak. I mean, it's not that rare. It's that quite rare now. I actually speak in construction because my story just fits everybody. It's about the mindset I was in, making a poor decision. I think that's why my story sort of resonates across the board.
Yeah, and when we're talking about a holistic approach to human error, we're talking about fatigue, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about organizational culture. These are entirely generic themes, entirely generic themes.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another question from Dan. Jason, do you get feedback from the business you talk at with? How do you apply the constructive feedback?
Yeah, for
He's
me,
perfect.
Yeah, no, I've always said it. I mean, any speaker I sort of coach and help, I say, don't get tied up in all the good feedback you get. Look for a criticism. So for me, anytime someone mentions anything about my presentation, I usually, there's such a positive comment, I can work on the presentation to make sure that bit is covered. So yeah, it's not negative feedback, it's just constructive criticism. So if anybody ever says anything about mine, I love it. It's the best feedback I ever get because I can work with that comment. So yeah, I can't think of anything being really bad. Some people say, why are we listening to this? Why is this guy talking about this again, fall off a ladder or an accident? So the fact that we speak out positive things now really resonates with people because everybody just seems to inspire to be, you know, the best version of themselves. So yeah, I don't mind criticism.
No, he's really good with it. He used to tell a smutty joke that he'd been telling for years, and one time a year ago, I said, Jace, I'm not sure that smutty joke, and I like a smutty joke myself, frankly. I said, I'm not sure that works anymore, and dropped it straight away. Just dropped it straight away.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another question from Greg. Jason, do you think any intervention could have prevented your accident? Will the work-based intervention have been sufficient to change your course?
Yeah, I go back to the moment I was at the bottom of the ladder, and maybe somebody could have said, you know, don't climb that ladder. Maybe my accident wouldn't have happened. Who knows? But what I do know is that if my accident hadn't happened, what sort of worker was I making at the time? Because I wasn't really interested in work. I was doing just enough. So I wasn't making a very good worker anyway. We concentrate so much on the accident. But if we take away the accident from actually happening on the day of my accident, what sort of worker was I making? So yes, the supervisor himself doesn't regret my accident as the fact that he walked away from the ladder. He was footing it on the way I came down. He walked away and I got to the bottom and I went back up and then I fell. What he actually regrets is not bringing up, speaking out the problems. He'd noticed a change in my attitude at work. He'd noticed sometimes I smelled of alcohol. I've been late a few times. So his regret was not about the accident itself. His actually concerns were that he allowed me on site that day. And the sad thing about my accident was nobody spoke up about any of these problems until the day after my accident. That's when everybody came forward and spoke about my poor work and being late. Nobody spoke about it before my accident. So when we talk about speaking up, yes, we should speak about safety, obviously, but also maybe speak up about what we believe our work colleagues may be going through. You know, don't wait till there's an accident, then say, I think there might be a problem. He might, you know, he's got some problems with his wife or whatever the problem is. We have to get into a place where we can openly speak about health, safety and well-being prior to anything going wrong.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Safety Differently is so good at, you know, is they say that, you know, the key question from the Safety Differently crowd is, you know, I want you to work safely and productively. You want to work safely and productively. What do you need? you know, and that generic question, I think, helps encompass some psychological and social issues that Jason's talking to here, you know. So are you okay is probably a much better question than what you think you're doing. Well,
yeah, I think that goes back into probably the question. If I was in such a bad place at the time of my accident, and maybe if somebody had spoken up about a lad being untied, maybe I'd just give them a letter of abuse because I was in a bad place. And yet, if someone took me to one side and said, "We've noticed you're not yourself, are you okay?" then maybe I would have spoken about the problems I was going through. So that sort of answers the question. We focus so much on the safety side of it, but there's got to be so much more.
Okay, and there's another question from Paul. Why do you think businesses are so reticent to enter the wellbeing arena?
Because they don't understand it very well.
I think there's the fear also. It probably links back into the example I gave of the guy. People are scared this is going to be about people having time off work, and it's actually going to do the opposite. You know, if we create a nice workplace and people are open to speak about problems, people will come to work. It's not about having time off work. If you're in a bad place, the best place you can be is in a good place of work, not sat at home by yourself on the settee. Yeah, unfortunately, that's what, you know, the theory is, that people aren't going to come to work. So the more open we can be about well-being and health and mental health, mental well-being issues, the more open we can be about these problems, people will still come to work. They'll probably do a good day's work because the problem we was thinking of has been brought out, and so that's sort of our viewpoint on this.
Yeah, I think that a lot of companies just basically think individuals' mindset is about the individual, and they should bloody well bring a positive one to work because that's what they're paid for. Others are scared of the whole concept. It's holistic and it's personal. You really need to shut up and listen if you're going to do it well, and that's quite scary for some companies, I think. So a case study this came to mind when Jason was talking. Finnair, I think it's Finnair. They opened up a process where you could self-refer for a professional counsellor, so kind of an accelerated EA program. You didn't have to go through any hoops. You just said, I want some counselling. And a lot of people, even though it's a Scandinavian airline and they're very progressive, a lot of people in the company were worried that that would be overused. Everybody would want to talk about their problems. It didn't happen. They didn't get overwhelmed. And a lot of people found it extremely useful, and all their KPIs in the wellbeing field went in the right direction. Absenteeism, turnover, reported presenteeism, motivation, all that stuff went in the right direction. So they were worried about it, but it turned out to be a really good decision, a really good initiative.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And lastly, from Russell, have you seen any examples of really good practice to engage employees in promoting mental health, and what were they?
Yes. I won't name names, but it starts with the leadership, of course, as everything always ever did, and you know, leaders talking about personal experience. You know, mental health first aiders can be hugely helpful, but the best programs don't necessarily have mental health first aiders at the core, because what mental health first aiders are trying to do is spot people who need referring and need support, and create an environment where it's okay to not be okay. Supervisors can do that. So if you have the right culture, you don't need mental health first aiders, although they, you know, obviously they can help and be a key element. But yes, we have seen organisations, as ever in the world of safety, often this is a reactive thing, because something horrible's happened and they're reacting to that. So suicides, or maybe a terrible experience for a key member of the C-suite. But more and more organisations, I think, are beginning to understand. You know, we're working with organisations, I won't name them, but they had a terrible incident where what happens is somebody flicked the wrong switch, cost them billions. And our job was, we got to stop people flicking the wrong switch. And we talked to them about our holistic approach and said, look, you know, one of the reasons people flick the wrong switch, so this isn't an accident, this is a, you know, continuity of business thing. is because they're distracted. They can be distracted because of mental health or because of fatigue, and they got it. They just said that, well, that makes perfect sense. And invested in it heavily, because they not because they wanted to be nice to their staff, although, you know, I don't want to downplay that, but it was a hard-bitten business decision. You know, that flick switch ended up on news at 6. You know, it was the second item on the news at 6, and it cost them a lot of money, and they really didn't want it to happen again. So I think more and more organizations are understanding that treating people well with a holistic approach is good for business. It's good for system, especially in 2021, for God's sake. You know, we're really going to need to get these things right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason, I'm rabbiting on.
No, I totally agree. And I think what sometimes helps this along is that senior people will actually speak about their own mental health issues. And one of my clients, we'd gone there, and it was a senior director. He had some time off work, and then I thought he just had 3 months off work, you know, holiday, gone golfing. He had a mental breakdown, and he was very reluctant to speak about it. But yet he finally got up in front of his staff and he told the story. You could see the people in the room. You know, if this, you know, he's our leader of our company, and he's admitting to us that he had himself some mental health, mental well-being issues, and there was dealt with, and the company looked after him. And I think that message from that guy resonated with all his workforce that it's okay to not be okay. So I think that is, we always look for, you know, inspiration from leaders, and if leaders can be the people who speak out that sometimes they had problems, it is very, very inspiring for the workforce.
Okay, that's great. So this will be the end